And we're live. Line check, line check. Can everybody hear us?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody joining the live stream. Welcome to you guys. And welcome, Greg Koch.
Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Round of applause.
Yo.
Isn't that great?
Very nice.
We've spoken 2 words and people are already freaking out. It's
Fooled them
amazing.
again.
Yeah, exactly. So, as we just spoke beforehand, this is your first time at Guitar Summit.
Correct.
Welcome to this event. How do you like it so far?
So far, so good. I've been running around like a madman today, but it's been great.
Amazing. So you did a workshop, you said?
Did a kind of
Or
a
concert.
private lesson-y thing for 25 or so people.
Yeah.
And then
Masterclass. That's called a masterclass.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sorry.
No worries.
And then we did a little sound check and ran through some stuff. Doug Wimbish is going to sit in with us tonight, so that's going to be fun. We had to figure out what we were going
Nice.
to play.
Okay.
And that worked out great. And then went over and did the workshop for Reverend.
Yeah.
And did another interview, and now we're doing this, and then we got the show tonight. So the coffee has been working.
A full schedule.
That's right.
Perfect.
It's the way it should be.
It's the way it should be. So I've read that your very first inspiration to dive into guitar playing was Hendrix.
That's correct.
So Hendrix, he inspired so many people, and he
Yes.
inspired you as well. But then again, you're very much known for the combination of different styles that you incorporate into your playing, among funk and country, all these things. Who else inspired you? Because Hendrix didn't play country. Who else from
No,
all
indeed
these
not.
different styles inspired you?
Well, kind of my gateway drugs to country were Albert Lee and actually Mark Knopfler.
Right. Okay.
His chicken picking activities initially inspired me. Actually, Jeff Beck on a song on There and Back, the second tune on that, I can't remember the name of the song, but there's one little breakdown where he's doing this chicken picking thing, and that's where I actually learned it from.
Oh, okay.
And
From Jeff Beck of all people.
correct. And then from there, I kind of did the deep dive. I didn't grow up listening to country music. I didn't like it. I was a rock and roller and into bluesy rock stuff, and just wasn't feeling the country thing until Albert Lee was playing with Eric Clapton on a record called Just One Night that came out
Okay.
around the time I started playing guitar. And he would take solos, and I'd be like, "That's not the blues scale. Something's amiss."
Something's off here.
And so then I researched who he was all about, and then I would see names like Jimmy Bryant and James Burton and all these. And then I got into Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed. There was another English guitar player by the name of Ray Flack that was playing with Ricky Skaggs in the early '80s, and I really liked what he did. And what's interesting about him is that he was a country player, but his big influence was Ritchie Blackmore, which was crazy.
Okay.
And he was weird style and a weird sound. He played a telly, but he played on the neck pickup through like a Lab Series amp.
Oh, a lap series.
That was his thing.
Wow, okay.
And but it was awesome sounding. So I learned a lot of stuff from him. And then Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers was actually some of my first chicken picking salvos were I would do chicken picking with the fiddle licks I got from Dickie Betts.
Right.
And then more Albert Lee. I really got into those Dave Edmunds records. The one that Albert Lee played on, that Repeat When Necessary, is on that tune Sweet Little Lisa. That's kind of an encyclopedia of chicken picking, telly molestations. And then I really got into Roy Buchanan, and then I got into Danny Gatton quite a bit. So
Oh, yeah, okay. Well,
those were all the guys that, and then I would hear Brent Mason later on, and a huge one also at that time was Steve Morris. Steve Morris played.
he can play everything.
Right,
Like-
and there was a tune. His first solo record came out when I was a senior in high school, and they had a tune on it called General Lee, which was with Albert Lee on it, and that was an encyclopedia as well of chicken picking activities. And it was so weird. It's like years later, I got to know T. Lavitz pretty well. Played on a couple of my records he was the keyboard player in the Dregs for years.
Yeah.
And we would always open up for Steve Morris and the Dregs when they were in town. But Steve was never there for our set.
Oh.
And then one year the last time we did it, he was there for our set, and I did my Spank It thing and all my crazy crap. And afterwards, he's like, hey, show me how you do that. I was like, I got it all from you. I don't know what you're asking for, but I'm flattered. But I don't know what I could show you. But that was an interesting thing. But yeah, Steve Morse was a big one. And so those were kind of the country guys.
And like the funk and even like jazzy influences.
Well, I did go to school for jazz. Early on, I really liked George Benson. Especially, I always kind of gravitated more to the soul
kind
jazz
of
things as opposed to the more straight ahead stuff. But that being said, I did end up getting into Wes Montgomery quite a bit, and a lot of the chord voicing stuff that I do that's jazz tinged is from Joe Pass. But kind of the fusion stuff, I was really into Mike Stern. A buddy of mine turned me on to Mike Stern when I got into college, and I got We Want Miles, and then that first Mike Stern solo record, Upside Downside. That was a huge Schofield fan, especially the records that came out in the mid '80s, like Loud Jazz and Blue Matter were huge ones. I was into Holdsworth. I loved Holdsworth. I was.
Oh, this guy is
It was hard initially, especially being kind of a blues goon. I'd hear Holdsworth and I was like, huh? And then all of a sudden I got it. And then
it takes some time. Yeah,
your ear gets attuned to those melodies, and then it's like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But you want to end a date fast. Put on some Alan Holdsworth when you're driving.
Yeah.
You drop me off at the next corner. Until they attune their ear. And
I need to get the heck out of here, please. Yeah, it's true. I love the way how Holdsworth explained his music, because it has nothing to do with music theory. He created his own.
Right. Exactly.
Pretty much.
Exactly.
And that's and it's nice that you mentioned Mike Stern, because the work he did with Michael Brecker. All that stuff is just.
The first time I saw Mike Stern play live, he was touring with Michael Brecker, and I'll never forget it. I was there's a big festival in my hometown, Milwaukee, called Summerfest, and this massive music festival, all these permanent stages, and it used to be really good about having genre-specific stages, so the jazz stage and blues stage, and whoever was touring that summer would stop at everyone would stop at this event. And so this one particular year, they had Michael Brecker and Mike Stern playing.
Wow.
And I showed up, and we weaseled our way to the kind of the side of the stage, and Mike Stern comes out, and he's setting up his own stuff. And I'm like, what? You think that someone like Mike Stern would have a roadie.
Yeah.
Nope. He's plugging in his chords, putting his amp, gets it ready to go. And they open up with this minor blues song, and it was on one of those Michael Brecker solo records.
Yeah.
And they're playing this minor blues, and it's the swing tune, and Brecker's building up the solo until you finally can't take it anymore.
Yeah,
And they're just like, what the hell? And then Stern takes over, and he starts off, and he's got that neck pickup clean sound, and it's got that little chorusy thing he has on, and he's working it, and he's finally building it up, and then he hits the overdrive, and it's building up, until finally just puts it in the back pickup of that Telecaster, and his legs are going back and forth, and he's screaming like a demon. And he gets done with the solo, and I was just so affected by it. He turned to the right to like my side of the stage, and we connected eyes, and I just went, that's the only thing I could do. I was just so flabbergasted when I just heard I just had to whip him the bird. But he started laughing, so I guess that was okay.
Okay, that's always it's always a good sign. It's definitely a good feedback. So, how do you keep fit in terms of guitar playing? Do you have a specific practice routine, or is it mostly I'm just playing?
Well, I'm playing all the time. So, although what's interesting is that the guys, when I'm out doing the Wildwood videos, they always joke about the fact that I'll play guitar all day, and then I'll borrow a guitar from the store, and then mess around at night, and I'm always playing. And then when I'm at home, my wife will tell you I'm playing all the time and making noise. That's why she's very happy that we're building a room over our garage that will be my music room. But during COVID,
well isolated, I hope.
Right, exactly. And I'd do like between 4 and 5 live streams a week, so I was playing all the time. And then I would do X amount of Skype lessons. I don't do as much because we've been traveling so much with the band. But in the last year, since COVID kind of subsided, we've been touring a ton with the band in the States, which is something we never really did, certainly in the amount that, we've already been gone 150 days out of this year playing.
Right.
So road chops are a whole different thing.
Yes.
So I find that playing is always good, no matter what kind of playing it is.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of trying to come up with new things, but it's a whole different thing when you've been playing a lot at gigs. It's a whole different level of fitness, if
Yes.
you will.
Yes. Yeah.
And both from a mental point of view and from a physical point of view. So I would say that the gigging definitely is a marked upshoot, shall we say, in that.
Okay. What was your first guitar like? Was it actually a decent guitar, or is it like, I've heard so many stories from people telling me, "Oh, my first guitar was such a shitty thing," did you have a decent guitar when you started? Or
Well, the first guitar I had, I borrowed from this girl up the street who was a friend of my sister's, and she had this nylon string El Degas acoustic guitar.
okay.
And the guy across the street played guitar. He had a nice Martin, and he showed me how to tune the guitar, and I learned like an A chord, and I knew that if I had the A chord and lifted it up, I'd get a G chord, and I'd go ding 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 ding. And I played cocaine.
Oh.
And then I'd go ding 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 ding. I did everything I possibly could with those two chords. And prior to that, I had taken music lessons. I played cello in 3rd grade. I always wanted to play guitar, but cello was available, so I played that, and I didn't practice, so my dad was pissed about that. And then I decided that when band came around, I would play snare drum and bell kit. And so there was the rental of that and lessons and so on, and I didn't really practice that. So now I want to play guitar. He's like, I'm not feeling it. You know, I've spent money and time and energy on these other things. I was like, guitar's different. And so he had a client of his that was a guitar player and a bass player and mandolin and banjo player. And he set up lessons with that guy. And in the meantime, I had a paper route back home, and I saved up my money for the paper route. And back then, people would always tell you, well, you got to start an acoustic before you get to an electric.
Yeah, it's the old teachings. Like, you got to start classical, and then from there at some point. Yeah. Okay.
So I bought. Ovation at that time had like a student line, like their Squire or Epiphone was Applause.
Applause, exactly. Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And I still have that guitar. It was great. It sounded great. It played good, but it wasn't electric.
No.
And I was like, Dad, I really want an electric guitar. So then I saved up a little bit more money, and I bought a pickup for it. It was called the Frap. I don't know if you remember those, but there's a picture of Zeppelin like in '77 playing, and he's actually using one. It was this little microphone that you put attached
into
to
the
top
okay,
with beeswax.
Right.
Like, you popped it in and went to a little preamp, and you plugged out of that, and I would plug it into my dad's stereo downstairs, and I'd be able to hear it. and then we had a little cassette player with a little microphone, and you'd turn up the volume on the microphone, and you'd shove it in the sound hole of the guitar, and it was like the Rust Never Sleeps Neil Young sound, which had just come out at that time. So I was like, check this out. Ding, 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 ding. Sounded awesome. So then...
and did your dad share that?
Oh, he didn't. My dad did not like it. The funniest thing about my dad is when we'd finally start rehearsing at home, my mom was hard of hearing. And I was the youngest of 7 kids, so I got away with murder. So when I would have my buddies over and we'd be rehearsing in the basement, my mom would just shut her hearing aids off, and she didn't care.
Oh.
My dad would get home from work.
Oh.
And we'd be playing, and he would come down in the basement. The door would open up. He'd come in like no one was there. He wouldn't look at us. It was like he didn't have any recognition that there were humans there.
Yeah.
Other than he'd go up and he knew where the off was on my amp. And he'd find it, and he'd just go. And he'd turn around and walk back up the stairs, and I'd say to my friends, we're done.
Band practice is over, guys.
George is home, and we're done.
Yeah.
But then right after that, the guy who I was taking lessons with told my dad, he's like, I can't teach this kid anymore. He's learned everything I taught him. So my dad was like, well, maybe this is, serious. And so then somehow I parlayed all of my stuff into I really wanted a Les Paul at that point in time, but there was no way I was going to buy, because I had gotten the Zeppelin bug at that point.
Yeah.
Much as I was a Hendrix and Cream, I was like totally bewitched by Led Zeppelin 1 in particular, because it was one record that for some reason I didn't listen to all the time when I was a kid. And a buddy of mine was over, and he's looking through my brother and sister's record collection, like, got a Zeppelin record in here. I was like, Zeppelin? I'm like, Hendrix and Cream are my thing. And then I hear Led Zeppelin 1. I'm like, what? So then I was totally bewitched after that and wanting to Les Paul, even though most of that's Telecaster. But I got a Lotus Les Paul. Remember the Lotus?
Lotus.
It was
the name rings a bell,
the
yeah.
Japanese cheapy Les Pauls, and then a PV Rage amplifier.
Oh.
And that guitar wouldn't stay in tune for love nor money. It just was. It was a piece of scheisse. So I ended up.
Very good.
I ended up getting a Fender Lead 1. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Single humbucker in the back. And that was my main guitar for about a year and a half-ish until I finally got a Telecaster. And the thing is about Tellies is that was not the guitar I wanted. It was the Fender guitar that was available to me. I wanted the neck pickup sound on a Fender guitar. And then when I got the Telly, it just turned out ergonomically. It was the guitar for me. And then I played 335s and Les Pauls and Strats for years, but always kind of went back to the Telly. And then when I finally just decided to stop fooling around, I just stuck mostly to Tellys. And
Nice.
That's kind of how that all worked out.
You are being recognized by a lot of guitar players, and
Because I'm bigger than they are.
Yeah, and guys like Steve Vai and Joe Bonamassa only have like the nicest things to say about you. Is that something that impacts you in a way, or are you just chilled about compliments?
Well, I always joke that I actually thrive on negative reinforcement, but
Nice one.
no, but yeah, of course, it's absolutely flattering when people are like that say. I mean, I think Joe's been very, very kind, and obviously he's an incredible musician and had an unbelievable career, and the whole thing with Steve Vai, that was crazy. There have been other things over the years, and getting to know James Burton, and and it's weird because these are a lot of names that unless you're guitar oriented or a guitar fan, you don't really know.
No, you have no clue.
And everyone that my wife is not into music per se. I mean, she likes what she likes, but she definitely didn't date me because of my guitar playing, right? And most of the people that my kids grew up with, the other parents, they have no clue what I do. As a matter of fact, at home, I was more known for I'd go on this radio show all the time, and I would tell stories and play some guitar and stuff. But they thought I was, he's the funny guy on the radio. And they didn't even know. But I didn't. And my favorite story is actually in Germany. We played at Music Messe doing a thing for Fender for the 50th anniversary of the Strat, and Jeff Beck was there. And to make a long story short, we get done playing, and they take me over to Jeff, and he turns around, and he says, like, the most amazing things. And I'm sitting there looking at my absolute idol, telling me, he's like, oh, I have my trick bag open, and I was saying, I'll steal this, and I'll steal. I'm like, I stole it all from you. It was the most surreal moment of my life, right?
Yeah, it had to be.
And I remember I got back home, and the next day I took the kids to school. I'm sitting there on the playground, and this other dad comes over. And then I knew, he was into music per se because he used to be a bouncer at a club, and he comes over, he's like, hey, you're back from Europe? I was like, yeah. He's like, anything cool happen over there? Did you rub shoulders with anybody? And I was like, well, as a matter of fact, Jeff Beck was at our gig. He's like, who's Jeff Beck again? I was like, nope.
No.
Get it.
No.
So now I don't even say anything. It's like if people say, hey, I'm like, oh yeah, we just did that. But yes, it's very, very validating in especially when it's just unsolicited, nice stuff that people say. You know what I mean?
No one's forcing Joe to.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not like what am I going to do for him? It's not about that.
Exactly.
So yeah, it keeps you going.
You mentioned Musikmesse and you mentioned Fender. Every time I saw you at Musikmesse, you were always with Fender.
Yeah.
Yet at some point, you started a relationship with Reverend Guitars.
Correct.
Did they approach you? Was that something you always had an eye on, or how did it come to?
Well, it's an interesting thing. For years I was doing the Fender thing. I see Ali Schwung right there, as a matter of fact. Speaking of the glory days of Fender musical instruments, I've had more fun with that individual right there. Always good times with the Fender Germany folks. We always had a great time. But I did stuff for them for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And in their words, not mine, I was kind of like the unofficial brand ambassador. I did all kinds of stuff from gigs, where we just go in and play. I would do things where they're like, hey, we're going to fly out to Rhode Island. There's this meeting of stockholders, and they just want to hear a little bit about what Fender is, and maybe you play a little bit. And it's like all these heavyweights from, the president of Harvard and this person. They're all there hanging out because they're all invested in Fender.
Yeah.
And I'm there to talk to them. And I'll never forget. By the time we got done with this one thing, we're on this 3-mast, giant, tall-mast ship cruising around Rhode Island, Newport Harbor, and the guy who was the head of the Doris Duke Foundation comes up to me and goes, "Greg, I just want you to know that I'm looking in the back of this boat, and I see a band playing, and I see the guitar player, and now because of you, I know that that's a telly. And by the look of it, it looks like there's a humbucker in the neck position." I said, "You are correct, sir. Case closed." So they would have me do all this stuff. But then what happened was that, the ownership changes,
Yeah.
of a company. And I was never an employee of Fender. I was always an independent contractor.
Yeah.
And it just got to the point where it's like, okay, now I got to schmooze new people. It's like, nah, I'm not.
Okay.
It's like, I'll do what they ask me to do if stuff comes up. And I was still doing a bunch of stuff over here. I'd go on European trips. And then they kind of took over everything, and they centralized everything. So all my cool relationships with all the different people all over the separate relationship with Fender Australia, I'd go over there every year and do fun stuff. So it became more corporatized, which is all fine and good. And then one day, Wildwood called me to do videos. And I went out there and started doing videos for them. And I was like, they made me... it was more consistent income, and
Okay.
then at that point, it kind of freed me up to do other things.
Yeah.
And all the different things I'd done with Fender had kind of dried up.
Right.
And one of our visitors in the Wildwood Lair would be Ken from Reverend.
Right.
So Ken would come out, and everyone thinks we're brothers because we're about the same size, about the same age. He always reminds people that I am older than he is by 2 years. Whatever, Ken.
Oh, God.
Anyway, we'd do these videos, and we had a good rapport, and one year, and we'd always hang out at like trade shows, especially I started doing stuff for Fishman, started doing the pickups with Fishman. I'd be at the Fishman booth, and it was next to the Reverend booth, and Ken and Joe Naylor would come over and be shooting the breeze, and I'd be like, "Ken, how come I play one of these parties you have?" Because they always had cool parties in Nashville and in LA for the NAMM show. He's like, "Well, you'd have to play a Reverend guitar." I was like, "Would you mind if I put some of those Fishman pickups in one of those Reverend guitars?" Like, "Hell, I don't care." So we popped some of the pickups in a not Scott Anderson. Oh my God, Pete Anderson. Although Scott Anderson's a great guitar player. Anyway, so I was playing this Pete Anderson telly with my Fishman pickups in it, and it was great. And so I ended up playing the show. It was a blast. And he's like, "Listen, no pressure, but if you ever want to do anything, Joe and I would love a stab at designing something for you. And but we're buddies, so if it doesn't work out, it's no big deal." And so I had some ideas of stuff we would do, and they put it all together, and it turned out great. And it's just been a very, very cool relationship. It's low key in the fact that the company is growing, but they're I don't think it's out of school for me to say they're not interested in like conquering the world and success at all costs type of a thing. It's just like, hey, this is a growing business. He plays in a band. It's a family. Him and his wife own the company. It's very down to earth and just I hate to use that word, organic, but
it's certainly a different company profile.
Correct.
It's completely different from what Fender is trying to achieve or going for. How amazing and convenient, on top of that, is it for you that the amp you play does not really need a signature name?
Correct.
Because, Koch.
Well, that was kind of a funny thing. So I was at Music Messe doing something for Fishman. And right across from the Fishman booth was the Koch booth.
Yeah.
And then Dolph Koch and his wife came over. And I had remembered that when I was doing a thing at the Fender booth the year before, she bought a bunch of CDs.
Okay.
So she came over and she's like, "Me and my husband are big fans," and da-da-da-da. And I said, "Hey, your amps are great. I was just in Italy and I used one of your amps at some music school I was at." And they're like, "Wouldn't it be funny if we worked together?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it would." So I kind of leaned up against one of their stack of amps and I took a little selfie and I put it online, and like the internet just was blown up. "What is this? You have your own amps?" I'm like, "No, but yes."
No, but yes.
And so then I ended up using one of their Twin Tone 3 amps, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
And So once I started gigging with that and really enjoying it, I said, I've got an idea for an amp. And so I threw out some ideas and they put it together and it was fantastic. So it's just been one of those things where, the name is not a coincidence, but the bottom line is it's a great amp. And I wouldn't play it if it wasn't a great amp. But the name is awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing. It's just called the Greg.
Yes. And now there's the new one, the Little Gristle.
Little Gristle.
Yeah, which is a lower wattaged. It's 12 or 4 watts. It's got a single EL34. And you can run it where you just kind of dime it and use the volume control. You can run it kind of clean and use pedals.
Okay.
But it's very, very cool.
Okay.
That one just came out.
Are you relying a lot on pedals, or are you a guy that also could play with just an amp?
I go between the two.
Okay.
So recently I've been using pedals. So I've got this overdrive pedal I've had for years called the Gristle King.
The Gristle King, yes.
And so prior to COVID, I was just going straight into that Greg amp because it's got gain staging, that's awesome, and it's got the reverb on it's glorious, and it's got a nice harmonic vibrato, so it almost sounds like a univibe. So I don't really need anything else, especially I'm playing in a band with an organ player. I kind of don't need much, as far as coloring and so on and so forth. And then during COVID, doing so many live streams from the house, I just got used to using pedals and maybe a little bit of delay and maybe throwing an actual univibe and my little Leslie simulator and maybe an Octavia and the wah and yada, yada, yada. So then I started using overdrive on the floor. So I run the amps clean and I use the pedals.
Okay. Okay.
That's my current, but it always changes.
Yeah.
But like when I did the workshop today, I just used the little Gristle amp, plugged straight in, turned it up, turned it down when I wanted clean-ish, and then turned it up, and away we went.
Yeah. People sometimes forget that you have these like pesky little knobs on your guitar that can also make a drastic change.
Totally.
People forget about it. It's like all you need to do is this.
Right. I'm always I'm always manipulating the volume and tone controls, and I've got that little button that gives me more on my Fishman pickup. So there's a lot of onboard doodling going on.
Exactly.
Yes.
Nice. Very nice. What kind of music are you listening to these days? What kind of music has an impact on you?
You know what? It changes. I mean, I still listen to a lot of old stuff. My youngest son listens to music that's completely different from what Dylan and I like to listen to. But my oldest son, Dylan, he likes a lot of the same stuff I do, but he also likes a lot of hip hop and some old school rap stuff. And so we'll listen to some of that stuff. Toby likes to listen to a lot of the Scary Goldings with Larry Goldings, and I enjoy that stuff quite a bit. I like that new Ariel Posen record is great.
Oh, he's just such an amazing player.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and his tunes are great.
Exactly. He's a great songwriter, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so I like him quite a bit. But I listen to a lot of old stuff. But the stuff my younger son got me into is like King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard or whatever it is. And then there was another one, Alien Porn Crumpets or something like that. Anyway, so they're it's just kind of whatever.
Obscure band names.
Yeah, and they're kind of like one band. It's like 1 minute's metal, the next minute it's like funk, and the next minute it's like punk, and the next minute it's crazy. But I listen to a lot of old stuff. What I'll do is I'll kind of rediscover one of my old favorites, and I'll just like go through the deep dive of going on YouTube and finding all the bootlegs, and just like listening to them over and over again, and finding different stuff. But it changes quite a bit. But I listen to a lot of old blues stuff. I do like some jazz stuff, but I like that rock and roll, and always got time for a little bit of Zeppelin. It's my guilty pleasure is rocking out to a little Physical Graffiti as often as possible. It's good for you.
Sounds like a very good mix. One last question before we have to wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you are currently touring.
Yes.
For how long are you going to be on this side of the Atlantic? And how is it going to continue?
Well, we're in... all the dates are at my website, which is gregkoch.com.
Right.
And we're here until next Wednesday. I actually go to Greece, and I'm doing stuff with the Jam Pedal guys down there. I'm going to do a workshop and hang out with them and cause some trouble. But prior to that, we'll be in France tomorrow. We're going to be in the Netherlands on Monday, and then we're in Rees, Germany, Rees.
RES. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Hey, yeah.
That's on Tuesday night, and then Wednesday we head back. I go home on the 30th. I'm home for a week, and then I go out to Wildwood, and then I get back from Wildwood, and then we start an East Coast tour of the United States. So
Nice.
we'll start heading east, and we start in Ohio, and we go through Philly, and we'll be in New York City and Boston, and all points in between, and then we end up in Halloween in Detroit, which will be
Nice.
bedlam, and then home, and then not going anywhere again until November. We're going down to Texas. We're doing some shows with Monty Montgomery. We're doing some co-bills, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And Dallas and Austin. We do real well in Austin, which is great. And San Antonio. And then I think we're playing in Tulsa. And then I'll go home, and then I'll probably end up doing more of these Allman Betts dates. I did some last year with the Allman Family Revival thing. And I was just talking to Devin Allman about doing some of those. So that'll probably be late December, early December, late November. I'll do some of those. And then we'll probably make our way back over here again in April or so.
Right.
And hopefully get over to the UK. What's funny about booking dates and so on and so forth, when you put your dates online, and I got a gal that helps me, do posts with all the links and so on and so forth, people are always like, why aren't you playing at Stuttgart? Or, why aren't you playing in Cleveland? And it's like, we post the gigs we have. We don't post the gigs we don't have.
Yeah, exactly. It makes perfect sense.
And it's not like we have a list of places, I'm never playing in these places. Like, you post the gigs
Stuttgart, forget about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice.
So we post the gigs. We're amenable to playing anywhere, mind you, but tours are put together where you got to fit in routing and what's available and so on and so forth. So I'm not ignoring you, Stuttgart or Cleveland or Poughkeepsie.
This is a message goes out to all the cities that, like Stuttgart, promoters available,
Exactly.
reach out to Greg Koch.
Exactly. We'll set you up.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a
pleasure.
busy schedule, and enjoy the rest of the evening. You're going to play later, and
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank
Thanks
you
for
so
talking
much.
to us, man.
Pleasure. Thank you.